So today, welcome back, and we're going to start today's session with a poem by Rumi. For all of you who are familiar with Rumi, you know he was a Sufi mystic, 16th century, I think. So I want you to take a few deep breaths and relax and just allow this poem to enter your psyche. One of the things it might do for you is to highlight the importance of simply notice. So go ahead and take 3 deep breaths. And this poem is called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So I think that this is relatively easy to relate to simply notice. So I would caution you as you're simply noticing thoughts, emotions, moods, impulses to action, and the condition of your body to not judge it. Invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So now we're going to shift into what I call the archaeology of the psyche. So whatever thoughts you've been noticing during your waking consciousness, and particularly patterns, I'm going to now suggest that those patterns are bubbling up from the unconscious mind, and very specifically from a set of unconscious beliefs. So I'm going to read some possible beliefs that you may hold and give you a couple of seconds to reflect on it and see if these apply to you. And these beliefs are what I call errors in perception about you, about others, and about life in general. So the first error in perception is, I am not worthy. So go deep on that and see if that applies to you. So these errors are obviously false. Nothing I do is enough. That may be playing out in your relationships. And of course, if we hold that unconscious belief, then it might play out in the terms of conflict with others. Nothing I do is good enough. So my father one day said, I can't change a light bulb without breaking it. That's a clear example of nothing I do is good enough. Nothing I do is enough I am not worthy. Bad things are going to happen. So this is a prediction of the future, and kind of a destructive way. Bad things are going to happen. One of the things I do with that, as it surfaces with me, is I say to myself, they're not happening now. To bring myself back into the present moment. The next one is, I am ashamed of myself. So McLaren talks about guilt and shame. So I'm going to offer this idea. Guilt is a belief that I did something wrong. In other words, I violated my value system. Much deeper, which is a mood of guilt, is shame. There's something wrong with me. Now keep in mind, these are errors in perception. They're not true. I don't know my purpose. I can't tell you how many adults I've dealt with that say they don't know what their purpose is. So look at that carefully. And one of the things we're going to look at in the future is a model called Ikigai, which is a real clever way of identifying one's purpose. So to make it real simple right now, let me suggest that your purpose is being who and what you really are, and then demonstrating that. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. A powerful book about purpose is Viktor Frankl's book called Man's Search for Meaning. Highly recommended. I am fine the way I am. Now, on the surface, that seems to be confusing. But if you look at it carefully, often that's behind things like denial. So I'm addicted, and I'm telling myself I'm fine the way I am, and that is simply not true. Also, it closes us off from feedback from others in the world at large. This is too good to be true. So now things are going well, and what I'm going to do to destroy that, actually it's not you doing that, it's the gremlin doing this. So I'm going to destroy it by believing this is too good to be true. I can take care of myself. So we're talking about a declaration of total independence. I don't need anyone. So once again, that belief can be devastating, divisive, separation. I don't deserve it or this, which relates back to I am not worthy. Of course you deserve it. And as I mentioned earlier, there is something wrong with me. I am broken and defective. I am a phony or a fake. Numbers of people have told me privately they feel like a phony or a fake. And one day somebody's going to see through it. I am alone in this. Well, no, we're not. Sometimes it's a matter of reaching out and saying, help. And here's one that will undo any relationship. I will find my completeness through another. So in the series called Conversations with God, God tells Neil Donald Walsh, the purpose of relationships is not to find completeness through another, but to share our completeness with the other. That could be a radical shift in relationships. I am a failure, very common. So I am a failure, I believe I'm a failure, so therefore I'm not going to take any risk because I don't want to fail. So back then, there was a man whose name is Leo Bruscaglia, who one day said in a presentation on TV, the greatest risk in life is taking no risk at all. There is not enough. Very limiting belief. There is not enough. Yes, there is. There's abundance. And this one gets a little tricky. I am obliged. Well, I'm going to suggest there are no obligations in life. There are only responsibilities. Response abilities, the ability to respond. I will be punished forever for my mistakes. Well, you can see how devastating that belief system is. In the Course in Miracles, it's clearly stated that karma and sin are not wrongs to be punished, but mistakes to be corrected. There's a lot of freedom in that because now I can recognize I made a mistake and I can do things like make amends, make it right, fix it. So if I hurt another human being, make amends. And of course, earlier we talked about the power of forgiveness. So forgiveness might be in order. Now here's one that's clearly based in two illusions. I am better than others. That's based in twin illusions of separation and superiority. And note, both are illusions. In fact, when people state, I'm better than you, what they're really saying is, I am inferior. Another error in perception. I don't know what's going on here. So, once again, we're talking about a third illusion that I call the illusion of ignorance. And I don't mean stupidity. Ignorance, one form of ignorance is denial. So I had a student in high school, senior in high school, in my psychology class, that walked up to me after class one day and said, Mr. Bernard, something is strange going on in my relationship with my boyfriend, and I don't know what it is. And I looked at her and said, yes, you do. She said back to me, I wouldn't be talking to you if I did. And I said, you know, not only do you know now, you knew from the beginning of the relationship. The next day she came to class and she said, you're right, I did know. And here's a biggie. Love is conditional. Well, that's a misunderstanding of love. When you look at different kinds of love, to say love is conditional is really an immature form of love, particularly for an adult. Love is not conditional. There's nothing I have to do to be loved. Love is unconditional. And two debilitating words, the next error in perception, or a false belief, I can't. Well, imagine saying I can't, and what that sets up. So this morning I ran across another collection of false beliefs. So I thought I'd share this with you. It's from a site called Mind Movies. The first one they list is, I'm too old. Well, if you think about it carefully, there are things you want to do by saying, I'm too old, they're over. So what I would suggest you do is say, well, I'm here now, so I can do some of these things, or I can reframe them and do them differently. I'm not smart enough. I've heard that frequently. I'm not smart enough. Utter nonsense. And closely related, I'm not educated enough. Another false belief. Of course you are. In fact, I'm going to suggest this right now. Look for the genius within, because it's there. You might want to look at Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences, because there are many kinds of intelligences. For example, I go to a mechanic who is mechanically a genius. His kids even told me he can fix anything. Well, that's a genius. I'm afraid of trying and failing. So once again, we're talking about the illusion of failure. So go ahead and take that risk. You have to have money to make money. Well, look at the life history of people who are financially wealthy. Often you'll see they started with, in fact, some started in debt. I've already tried everything. Well, no, you haven't. Just look around. Look into the field of infinite possibilities. Talk to friends. Read books. It's selfish of me to want more. Oh boy, I live with that one. We're talking about that generates guilt. So desire generates, or denial of desire generates guilt. And I'm not saying act on every desire. What I'm suggesting, don't deny it. I don't feel that I really deserve it. Now, that's closely related to I am not worthy. I don't have the willpower. Well, of course you do. We have this thing called free will, so exercise it in whatever direction you want to exercise it in. You are free willed. So these are some of the errors in perception or false beliefs you might want to look at. If you do a real deep dive on these beliefs, you'll probably find more. So what we want to do next is talk about the work of particularly Joe Dispenza. The book that I read is called Evolve Your Brain. Now, he says something really interesting in that book, interesting to me. The mind is the activity of the brain. So he's basically implying to me that we can't change the mind with the mind, because the mind is operating from the program. So it arises from the brain. So what we need to do is evolve the brain. He goes into great detail about the biochemistry and the physiology and the neurology of our belief systems, and how it's important to change what I call these errors in perception or false beliefs. So I'll give you sort of the bottom line on Joe Dispenza's approach. he did some study into the research that was done on mental rehearsal. And he specifically mentions a group of 3 people playing, I think it was a particular piece on the piano. And one group practiced for about an hour. The other group mentally rehearsed for an hour. The third group did nothing. And probably somewhat of a surprise, the mental rehearsal group did almost as well as the group that practiced. So he gives very detailed descriptions of how to do mental rehearsal. Basically, what you're doing over time is changing these errors in perception. The other person I'll mention again is Bruce Lipton in his book, Biology of Beliefs, in which he highlights the importance of our belief systems and the relationship to our biology. So I want to emphasize that these are errors in perception or false beliefs. So the way to change it, which is really changing the brain, is to what my wife calls pick the antidote, or the opposite, the antithesis of any of these beliefs, and mentally rehearse and practice the new belief system, which in turn evolves the brain. So that's very exciting to have that opportunity. Most of these people, if not all, do have YouTubes, so you can look them up on a YouTube and get some basic information. Yippee!
Don't give me those little. That'll make you do it 50 times.